let me begin by explaining that as more and more people are beginning to understand, our Messiah was not called Jesus at the time of his birth, because Jesus is an English word, and English wasn't even invented until centuries and centuries later. Because he was a Hebrew, he was naturally given a Hebrew name at birth, and that name was Yeshua. However, in Greek, his name translates to Iesus. Iesus. That is, in Greek, it's a 3-syllable word, Iesus. Just as his Hebrew name, Yeshua, is a 3-syllable word. It is simply the normal way of language and language translation that a name in one language can sound quite different in another language. That English says Jesus, a 2-syllable word, is a great example of how it can differ. Now, the words Messiah and Messianic are English sound-alike renditions of the Hebrew word Mashiach. But they're not actual translations. They're just sound-alike. Because the actual English translation of Mashiach is anointed one. Anointed one. That's the translation of the word. The word Christian is really just another English sound-alike rendition of the Greek word Christianoi. Christianoi. It's a sound-alike. It's not a translation of the word. Since the New Testament was written in Greek, then we must understand that Christianoi is but the Greek translation variation of the Hebrew root word Mashiach. That's all it's doing. That's all it's translating. This fact creates some serious theological, doctrinal, and historical difficulties for us. Because to the ears of non-Jews, it seems as though when we read Acts 11:26, a new religion, Christianity, was in the process of being formed in Antioch, and its members were called Christians because they were named after their master, Christ. And they were separate from the way that was being led by Jews. So it's then assumed, or taught outright, that beginning at Antioch, Gentile Christians separated themselves. They began attending churches, while Messianic Jews attended synagogues. And when this happened, some Jewish believers labeled as Judaizers popped up. And they tried to stop this separation of Gentile believers and instead draw them back to Judaism. That's pretty much the story, except none of this is accurate. Much of it's due simply to translation errors, even more to cultural misunderstandings. Here is the reality. When a Greek-speaking Jewish believer talked to other Greek speakers, whether they were Jews or Gentiles, then of course, what language did he use? Greek. That's his language. So he would use the Greek word Christos. Christos, when talking about Messiah Yeshua. Why did he say Christos? Because Christos was the Greek word for the Hebrew word Mashiach. It's that simple. This Christos now, see, this does not properly translate to the English word Christ, as it's normally taken. In recognition of this fact, some of the newer English Bible versions, such as the ESV, for example, is trying to rectify this by inserting the word the before the word Christ. The Christ. That is, instead of saying Jesus Christ now, some of these newer English versions finally will get it right. And they will say Jesus the Christ. Why do you do that? See, Christos is not a proper name. Rather, it just translates literally Greek Christos in English means anointed one. Why? Because it's translating Mashiach in Hebrew, which means anointed one. Jesus Christ is not Jesus' first and last name, like Tom Bradford. Let me say this in another way to try and help you. If I take the English word Christ, okay, and I want to say it in Greek, there's no Greek word for it. If I want to take the English word Christ and translate it into Hebrew, there's no Hebrew word for it. But if I want to translate the English words anointed one into Greek, there is a Greek word for it, Christos. If I want to translate this English word anointed one into Hebrew, there's a Hebrew word for it, Mashiach. Anointed one equals Mashiach equals Christos, not Christ. All Greek Bible manuscripts, all use the word Christos when speaking about Yeshua, not as his name. Rather, it's indicative of the position he holds. And his position is, he is the anointed one. You with me? A little complicated, isn't it? What has happened is that unfortunately, when the Greek Christos was given an English rendition as Christ, rather than now Christ simply meaning anointed one, at some undefined point in history, in the history of the Gentile church, the term Christ turned from being an office that Yeshua held, the office of the anointed one, and it became his proper name. It is fascinating that even the secular Wikipedia fully acknowledges this.